All right, guys. So, continuing on from where we were last video, I'm going to go and keep kind of beefing out this character, adding in some more pieces. I got fingers, head. I'm just going to be adding on some more primitives, and then just to kind of beef it up, and then add in uh, working on basically like muscle groups and muscle structures for this character. So kind of moving into a different phase, but using kind of a similar approach. So I'm going to go ahead and get the primitives brush back out. Let's go ahead and start adding in. Actually, go back over to the topological. I'm tap on this guy right here, and I'm just kind of work on it for a little bit. And the reason why is I just kind of want to get a little bit more of that muscular look. I'm just going to pull it over just a little bit. And then just kind of shaping the hand just a little bit. And so this kind of is going to form the tendons that'll go under the hand for the knuckles. So something like that. Almost looks a little cat paw like. Let's do that. We'll do the thumb. Yeah. By the way, just in case you're curious, I'm listening to Howard Shore. Any of you guys are fans of Lord of the Rings films? He was the main composer. Fantastic music. Fantastic movie too. Or all three of them were great movies. Hobbits could be better. I could have had more fun with the Hobbit movies. All right. So you'll notice that how I'm going to be sculpting the hand is basically I'm going to be taking the hand as a relaxed pose instead of it sitting out kind of as a pancake, stretched out or anything like that. I don't really want any tension for this pose. I mean, so when we rig it, it actually ends up being a little bit easier to work with because we can rig it to close into a fist, or we can have it open up a little bit more easily. So see, I'm kind of using the spheres to my advantage to try and create the segments of the hand right here. And the nice thing is, since these are all separate spheres, I can very easily, modify each one if I need to. something like that. You'll notice that the hand, the thumb, the inside of the thumb is facing towards the inside of the hand. It's not facing up. The inside of the thumb is not facing down. The back of the thumb is facing out. It's not facing up or down. Your hand naturally does that. Hold out your hand, relax it. The thumb is 90 degrees to the plane of the wrist. Okay, so if this is a plane, the back of the thumb is 90 degrees to that, perpendicular to that. It's very important to keep in mind. All right, let's do first segment. And also notice here, I did 2 segments for the thumb. Humanoid thumbs have 2 segments on them. You have the first and second, and there's a joint at the base of the thumb, and there's a joint in between the first and second segments. That's really important to keep track of. We do technically have an extra joint to the thumb, but it is buried into the base of the hand. So when you move your thumb in and out and close it, you'll see that you actually move right kind of where the wrist is. So that's actually like an extra little joint. But when we're looking at it, it doesn't appear that way. Because it's buried in that massive muscle. So visually speaking, it's not as apparent. Go ahead and kind of bring this out. Also, keep an eye on, I'm following a lot of humanoid proportions here. The base segment of your finger is longer. It's almost as long as the second and third segments put together. So the first segment, the second segment, and the third segment get consecutively shorter. So something to think about as you're working on this. So here you'll see I'm just kind of making each one of these segments just a little bit shorter than the previous one. I'll shrink this guy down a little bit. You'll see it's kind of going inside, or it's not shrinking in the way we would want it to. It's because we have symmetry turned on. It's actually scaling from that position, from that center point between the 2 finger segments, or between the 2 fingers on either side of the body. So that's why it's acting kind of funky. Pretty long finger right there. I say I don't like the Hobbit, but I will say they have really good music. Really fantastic music. I'm just actually going to shrink down that finger a little bit. See, that's kind of weird. Yeah, like that. It's probably something to do with symmetry. I just turned off symmetry for a second. It's going to mess up what I have on the other side, but I'm going to duplicate it over when I'm finished. And honestly, it's going to make it just a little bit easier to work with. I'm going to actually duplicate this thing over here too. Let's make this one just a little shorter. Well, actually, probably should do a little bit longer. I'll just do that. Okay. We have the pinky. Pinky's going to definitely be shorter. Again, we're just going to bring it over and kind of bring it up. So you'll see that the way we're, again, sculpting this hand, a little bit relaxed. Yeah, it looks good overall. I think I want this middle finger to kind of rotate in just a little bit. Mask off that finger. Essentially, second. I'm going to switch my mask over to a lasso. So I'm going to mask out both of these, and then I'll rotate around the fingers a little bit more. It's where they're kind of radially rotating around that one axis. Okay. There you go. So you see how I was talking about we're having issues here with these fingers. So let's go ahead and mirror that over. I'm going to go to geometry, modify topology, mirror and weld. You see it pops it over. Looks good. All right, let's go ahead and handle the feet. And I think I'm just going to do the same thing I did before. I'm just going to keep, I'm just going to go ahead and keep the symmetry off, and then I will bring it back on when I need it, making sure to mirror and weld when I need to. Now, just keep in mind, mirror and weld, it's going to go from left to right. If you do it on the right side in the mirror and weld, it's actually going to delete what you made, because again, it's going from left to right. So you want to make sure that you're watching that. Okay. Do insert primitives. Just go move topologically. I'm going to move this, redo this foot a little bit. Now, something I've been kind of considering is adding in a slight digigrade foot, meaning the ankle would be brought up just a little bit, kind of like a Tyrannosaur foot. I don't honestly know if I really want to do that, but I do like having that kind of digigrade look for feet. I feel like a minimal digigrade foot wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. You definitely add it in and kind of make it look a little bit more interesting. So let's maybe add that in. So what I'm gonna do is just go ahead and mask off this area. Actually, this is just a little bit more. we'll just kind of talk about how I'm going to go about it. So I'm masking this off. I'm going to move the point over here and kind of rotate that down a little bit. I don't want a huge digigrade leg. I mean, I don't want like a really long ankle. Just a slight raise on the ankle, I think, would be good. So something like that. That up. It's hopefully that we can smooth that out. And then the toes will come out of there. And so there'll be 4 toes. And we'll go ahead and add those in. Just like we did before, we're going to go and add in places for the toes to kind of start off. One, two, three. And then since the way I did is I have a thumb and 3 fingers, we could do a thumb, like a dew claw, honestly, kind of like up here. And that could be kind of interesting. Just kind of form that a little bit. Middle one, bring that up a little bit more. All this is going to get sculpted together at some point anyways. But this is kind of our roadmap for how everything is going to go. This one. Yes. Like that. Funky to me. Switch over to a regular move brush. Some of these spots I do kind of need to get a little bit more sculpting. It's a little more forming right there. Okay, we'll be adding in the caps and all that soon. There we go. So we're going in with toes. Bring the brush those down so it's a bit easier to rough. So with toes, it's kind of the same thing as the fingers. I mean, like our toes were kind of fingers at one point. But you'll see with like your big toe, you have 2 joints. Then your other toes have 3 joints. Kind of weird and funky. I'm kind of thinking like how maybe these feet work, and kind of going back and thinking about that drawing of the feet that I had before. And let's see if these creatures are maybe 2.5 meters tall. They probably weigh, let's say, 200 to 300 pounds. So they're not light. And if you look at something of similar size, we'll say like a Komodo dragon. So let's take a look at their feet. Now, granted, Komodo dragons are not bipedal, but they are quite large. So they got these huge claws. They have relatively short toes compared to other like lizards. They have thick soles, really thick leathery skin. So let's see if we can kind of like work some of that into this. But then also, if we bring in a bipedal creature, let's say ostriches, since ostriches and emus and birds in general are basically the closest things we have to living dinosaurs, which in some ways they're debated to be dinosaurs still. One of the things that I note, well, beyond the fact just how skinny their feet are, look how thick those pads are around the toes. Since these are such large, heavy bipedal creatures, you'll notice like their claws aren't necessarily the longest or sharpest because they're continuously like moving and like walking and stuff. Emu and cassowary, I feel like look a little more dinosaur-like, but they still have fairly thick pads on their toes, and their toe claws are not overly sharp, because if they were long and sharp, I mean, which they are kind of long and sharp, but like if they were super long, like you see like on some other lizards, like say a Komodo, it would probably cause them to trip. It would cause them more issues while they were walking. And that's kind of similar to what you see on, like, say, something like a Tyrannosaurus Rex. Um, yeah, they have these huge claws, but like if you look at the scale of the animal, the toe claws are not that much larger than, say, an emu. So I feel like that's a good direction to go in, taking kind of some feedback or take some reference from Komodo dragons, cassowaries, emus, and ostriches. Now, one of the things I do love about cassowaries is they pull something that velociraptors, which were a type of dinosaur um, pretty famous in Jurassic Park. They have these big toe claws, essentially. These are defensive or offensive weapons. And the cassowaries use it to basically slash you open if they don't like you. You do not want to fudge with a cassowary. They are nasty, nasty animals in regards to this giant toe claw. But you see just how, in relation just how short that toe that the toe claw is attached to is. So it's not really any longer than the other toes, but that toe claw in proportion is gigantic. So kind of interesting. Something I do see a lot is this kind of little pad right here that sits on top of that joint. So I think I'm going to work that in there as well. Okay. We'll realign this piece right here. Let's go back to that. How many joints does a emu foot have in it, or cassowary foot have in it? Kind of hard to tell. See, 1 and 2 right there. Okay, so we got 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay, actually, most of those extra joints. 1, 2, 3, and then here's to be a fourth one right here on the tip of the toe. One, two, three, four. Yeah, so actually probably should be something we add in. Although visually speaking, we're not necessarily going to be seeing it that easily with looking at that kind of that kind of structure, but it'd be good to consider. So you see that the toes are a bit longer than what I'm kind of really wanting. Let's just go ahead and shrink that a little bit. Straighten that. Okay. I'll thicken up a little bit more. Because also there's going to be that toe claw that's going to come off here as well. Okay. I think I'm going to want this a little bit bigger. Maybe a third one. Level the feet out just a tiny bit. That looks better. Okay. Do a mirror and weld. There we go. And that's going to be your basic pose. I'll add in the dew claw. It's going to sit in there as well. I'm sorry. So as we're creating these characters, one thing I am kind of avoiding is having overlapping features. The reason why is because when we get into dynameshing, we don't really want these parts to kind of glue together. So like say, for example, your toes on your feet will naturally kind of touch each other, just how they are. But we don't necessarily want that to happen in the model because, again, like I said, the dynameshing will cause it to essentially glue together and it can create a fairly large problem when we get around to retopologizing the model. We're going to be redoing the topological flow of the model itself. So we do want to be careful of that. So that's why I'm just kind of making sure that like all of my stuff is just a little bit offset from each other. All right. I have like a little toe claw or something come off of there. And okay. So you'll see that now as we're adding these spheres and kind of working with this is kind of getting a little bit like an anatomical look where we're seeing like tendons and muscles and stuff kind of, work together. And we're starting to really kind of build up this form now at this point, which is kind of cool. Let's go ahead and do symmetry again. I just turned it back on. And we're just going to go ahead and start kind of adding bulk and muscles and stuff to this character. I'm going to bring a little bit right here for the thighs. I'm going to be adding in some muscles on the legs. He's going to look a little bit bony. You'll see once we start adding in the extra pieces, you'll see it's a little more sense. Okay, so once we start adding in these muscles, it's a good idea to go ahead and try to match realistic muscle forms as much as possible. So let's say one thing I like to do is to do, you know, obviously we're doing research here. We have these pictures of, you know, bird feet and all that. And we need to continue doing this, you know, pulling in this reference material as much as humanly possible. And so I'm going to be pulling in reference from bodybuilders. And this is for a couple of reasons. Bodybuilders, their job is to show off muscle groups. Yeah, the muscle groups may be kind of insanely overdone, but you can distinctly see every single muscle on a bodybuilder. You can see the pectoral muscles, you can see the triceps, biceps, traps on the back. You can see basically everything around them, the calf muscles, you know, everything. And that's really useful. Do we need to make our characters as buff as, you know, this dude right here? No, not at all. But me and you are going to have roughly the same number of muscles, or probably the same amount of muscles as this guy. His muscles are just way more developed. There's a lot more work put into them. Arnold Schwarzenegger has the same number of muscles as this guy, even though they look completely different. So it's a good idea to look up reference, you know, medical reference of muscle groups, physical reference of people actually working out, to get an idea of like where you need to put these muscle groups. And when it gets to sculpting these individual groups, I would say follow what you've been told to do in life drawing. Don't necessarily try to draw, or maybe even painting, but when I was in life drawing, when I was in painting, I was not necessarily told to copy the object as much as I was told to draw the shape. And once you start drawing the shape, then the object kind of comes out of that. And the reason why I say that is because if you look at some of these muscle groups are going to be really confusing. You know, when you're looking at it, you're trying to figure out like what you're actually looking at. And especially when you're looking at like the back muscles, like let's see if there's like this guy right here. It might not be easy for you to really understand what you're looking at. You may end up putting an idealization in of what you're wanting versus what is actually physically there. When in reality, if we just sculpt what we see and just go after those forms, then we kind of lose a bit of that idealization, and you end up coming out with something that looks honestly far more realistic because you're pulling from real life rather than what you think it should look like. Now, my favorite bodybuilder, that should be no surprise, he's the greatest one ever, Arnold Schwarzenegger, the Terminator himself, Conan the Barbarian. And the reason why I say this is because he was Mr. Olympia, Mr. Universe multiple times, but he still looks far more natural than like some of these guys. He clearly works out a lot, but you know he was bodybuilding at a time back in the 70s and 80s that it felt like it wasn't as insane as kind of what you see like with some of these newer people. His body just to me appears to be, you know, much more natural, much more, you know, it's not realistic, obviously. I mean, it's closer to realism than some of the insanity that you see with other people. And you can very clearly see the muscle groups, which is great. So I tend to lean more towards, his stuff. So a lot of my um, male muscular sculpts end up kind of looking a little bit like Schwarzenegger, but that's just honestly just because I find the reference for him to be pretty consistent, um, and really easy to come across. Especially from his younger years, from like the 70s and 80s. Although to be fair, I'm sure even in his 70s and 80s now, because he's probably like 80 something or 70 something, the guy can definitely still whoop your butt for sure. But anyway, so let's go and kind of work through this. So let's look at something like this. So when I'm going to be putting in spheres and kind of shaping them, something to think about is if you look at the way the muscles are sitting on top of the body, they're actually wrapping underneath each other. So you have these biceps here, okay? They actually go underneath the top of where the pectorals are going into the shoulders. So they're not just sitting next to each other. They're layering underneath each other. The attachment points up here on the shoulders for these muscles are sitting up there. These pectorals are sitting on the center of the breastbone. Oh, why am I getting Eclipse music? I guess Howard Shore did movie or music for the Eclipse series. Anyway, so you see that there's layering that's going on here. You'll see the way that the arm muscles kind of wrap around um, the two bones inside the arm. You see how they kind of wrap around each other. You see that right there. Let's see. And then we can kind of see on the back right here how it actually dips down between as we have massive sets of muscles on the back, right back here, that are attached to your either side of your spine. And they come up and basically form right through there. So that's a good photo too. You can see those different shapes and stuff. Now, again, do we need to go this side, in depth with the musculature? No, no, we don't. But it's good to have at least, these basic understanding so that when you add them in, you're not just putting like lumps. You're putting in actual forms that flow under each other and attach to the right bones, um, and attach to the right places and perform the way they need to. Because otherwise, it's just going to come off looking bad, just in general. So let's go back to here. And we'll just go ahead and grab one of these images. And we'll use this as reference. Okay. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and turn on my floor. I'm going to turn on my X, Y, and Z. Okay. So I'm going to go and load in some images in here. And let's go ahead and do that. So I need to go ahead and load in the texture, which is going to be the image I just downloaded. I'll go texture, import. Hang on one second. Okay, so I had to bring that window back. This is going to be on my desktop. Arnold Schwarzenegger. Click it open. So you'll see the Arnold Schwarzenegger photos right there. And then I'm going to go into Draw. And you'll see where we have like open, save. I'm going to go down to where it says front, back, map 1. And I'm going to go and set map 1 to be that image. Okay. I'm going to change the scale. I'm going to change the horizontal offset if I want to. So you don't really need the frame opacity on, so I'm going to turn that off. Really just need the image. And Z, there we go. So if you have like any side views you want to add, you can put it through here. If you have any top views or anything like that, you can put it through there as well. And then also if you wanted to do, let's change that. The horizontal offset if you want to, just kind of move off to the side if you want. I'm not going to move it off, just leave it off the side. Now we have the image we can kind of look at. Okay. And this will give us some reference for us to view. And actually, let me see if I can change the background color. Here. There we go. So I can see that easily. Okay. Let's see the project. Screws are thrown in some Z screws. So I'm going to kind of maybe start with this one right here and then kind of work my way through the thighs. And so you'll see this one kind of will come right up above the knee, and it kind of creates almost like a diamond shape right there above the knee. And then it kind of tapers off. Smooth that out. Just right up here. And it gets wrapped up in another couple of muscles right in there. Let's create the next one right here. This one. This one kind of pops out a little bit more to the side. This guy, maybe put him a little bit more over to the center. Oops, I'm gonna bring them up a little bit. And then I'm just kind of looking at what we see here. Okay. And then again, another muscle that kind of goes into the inside of the thigh right here. So I'm going to kind of go like that. It's a little bit tricky. I want to get stuff is closer to the center line with symmetry turned on. Make your brush size a little bit smaller and it can end up being a little bit easier to work with. Go. So again, see how we're kind of wrapping this around. Just snip it out just a little bit. And we'll do the one that kind of sits. That's actually maybe a couple actually right here. Pull this in and tuck it down into here. Smooth that out. Looks like it doubles up a little bit. And that's going to do it. Here. I need that little branch. And, and as it goes out this way. I'm not being 100% accurate on this. I'm just kind of trying to copy the pattern a little bit, but it's going to fit the form of the body that I'm creating. And clearly the body I'm creating is not a bodybuilder. Yeah, it's a lizard man, but again, we're just applying some of those concepts. Not bad. We're getting, we're getting some nice buildup right here. We'll work on the back. I'll do it mirror and weld. Let's add in a couple here. Let's actually double check some reference here. Let's just give this some light muscle anatomy. And let's see what we got. Okay, so we got the gluteus maximus, which is going to be the large muscle on the butt. And then it looks like we're going to have some bundles kind of going straight down, and then they're going to wrap around the knee or the back of the knee. Okay, so let's work that in. Okay. Do another one. Here's if you watch videos on or watching like behind the scenes work on a lot of visual effects films, you see a lot of times their feature departments will show sculpts of the characters that will emphasize muscular, like muscular buildup and skeleton and stuff. Um, that's, not only to have a greater emphasis on anatomy, but it actually has a distinct use in the visual effects process. What happens is they basically will take um, broken down versions, like simplified versions of muscular characters, and then have the skin that sits on top of it. So the muscles actually flex and move the way they should, dynamically. But then what happens is the skin sits on top of all of that, and it actually moves, and it flexes, and it shrinks, and it folds, and it does all sorts of cool stuff. So this is actually not just an exercise, but this is something that, if you ever end up doing character modeling, can be extremely useful. Like, oh yeah, I remember doing that. Okay. I'll take a break for a second. I'll come back with a new video.